And welcome. I'm Dave Rothenberg, and this is Rothenberg Untucked, episode 2. The first episode went off without a hitch. Everyone was very pleased, but we didn't have a guest. So we turned the tables to Carl Banks today. We're going to grill Carl about Lawrence Taylor, what it was like being drafted third overall, Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, lot to do with Carl. What else are you going to get? You get the normal staple of Rothenberg Untucked. You're going to get Stump Rothenberg, and on top of that, you're going to get story time. And I got a doozy today. Story time with Rothenberg as well. So sit back, relax, and let's get rolling. It is now time for Rothenberg Untucked. And welcome back to Rothenberg Untucked. I'm, of course, your fearless leader and host, Dave Rothenberg. And boy, we are in for a treat today, everybody. I mean, the NFL draft just took place. We know about how the Giants did, the Jets did. A lot of people think the Browns did really well. We're going to reflect on the draft from, oh my God, I mean, almost 40, is it possible? Almost 40 years ago. Let's bring him in. Of course, we're going to do Stump Rothenberg. Of course, we're going to do story time with Rothenberg as well. But let's bring in, and this is it. We just launched the podcast 1 week ago. Excellent reviews. Everyone very pleased with what we've done so far. But our first ever guest, the great Carl Banks from the New York Football Giants. And that's how I remember you. Carl, welcome aboard to Rothenberg Untucked.
Dave, thank you for having me. I didn't know I was the first.
You are the first. You will not be the last, but you are the first. And you are one of, I mean, if you're a Giants fan, everyone remembers you so fondly. So we have a lot to get into today, my friend.
Yeah, don't screw it up with your first guest now.
I'm not overly concerned. I think we're going to do phenomenally well. So I want to get into this. There's so many avenues that I want to kind of dive into here. Let's start with back in your day. You're the third overall pick in the 1984 draft, and then you watch the draft from last week, and it's you talk about pomp and circumstance and just the magnitude and how big of a deal it is, and the commissioner hugging everybody. But in 1984, when you're the third overall selection, it was not nearly the same level of magnitude that it is today, is it?
No, I think the only thing that applies is watch. When you said the word watch, that's what I had to do. I had to watch it on TV. Imagine a world where there was no internet access and there was no up to the minute mock drafts. It was like, 3 mock drafts a year, preseason, midseason, postseason. In college football, it was Streets and Smith magazine and maybe one more. I think Mel Kiper, he was probably in his first year in 1984. So I literally, because I was not a kind of a darling of the national spotlight, because Michigan State was a horrible football team. And there were some real good powerhouses out there like Oklahoma and Florida and Texas. And they had a who's who of linebackers in Arizona. And so I didn't even know where I stacked up, because leading up until the draft, I wasn't originally invited to the Senior Bowl or to the Combine. So I had George Perlis was my coach and, former defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he told me that he thought I was good enough to be a top draft choice. But I didn't get invited to any of the All-Star games or Combine. So he got me to I think it was called the Blue-Gray game. It was a game that no star players really wanted to play in, because they had the Senior Bowl and the Hula Bowl and the East West Shrine, all these warm weather places. This one was in Birmingham, Alabama on Christmas Day. And the reason George Perlis wanted me to go there is because it was being coached by NFL coaches. And so I would be able to get the exposure that I needed. So I go there, I get the MVP of the game. When I get back, I go to the football facility, and the coach calls me in his office, and he has invitations to the Senior Bowl, to the Combine, both Combines at the time, and the Hula Bowl. So it kind of worked out that way, but I was just never really on anybody's radar. And then, I go to the Combine, and I'm seeing all of these guys that I watched on TV: Jackie Shipp, Jeff Lighting, Wilbur Marshall, just Ricky Hunley, which was like, he was Mr. Everything. And it was just Carl, and I just went and did what I did. Um, Come draft day, the phone rings and I'm the third player picked in the NFL draft. And it was interesting because technically I was the first player selected on draft day because the USFL had kind of made the NFL jump ahead and sign some players that they wanted. So Dean Steinkuhler and Irvin Fryer were selected 1 and 2, but they were drafted before draft day. So on draft day, I was the first player selected.
So, did you have any idea? You talk about the process leading up to it and the fact that, you were not considered blue chip or elite and had to go to the blue gray game, a game that doesn't even exist anymore. Did you have any idea that you were going to be the third pick by the Giants? Or when they took you third overall, were you like, whoa, how about that?
No, I had no idea I was going to be selected third pick. I didn't even know I was going to be projected in the first round. Keep in mind, again, all the magazines, they were covering, the big time schools. Michigan State was a big time school, but we were horrible, right? Did I think I was good enough to be an NFL football player? Absolutely. But it was just kind of the process as it played out was kind of bizarre because I just went and did what I did, and it caught everybody's radar. Gil Brandt tells the story of when he had me at the combine. I don't know if I still have the record, but do you remember the game Simon that lights up and you had to
Sure.
have the memory recall? So they had their own version. Like the Cowboys were always ahead of the curve when it comes to this type of stuff. So I went and they had their own testing and they put me on this little Simon deal and I aced it. Like he said, nobody had ever gotten 100% on it. And I did. And so he was a little ticked off. He tells a story years later of how he didn't think the Giants were going to draft me because at the Senior Bowl, Bill Parcells would never pay attention to me. And Bill tells a story because of his success with Lawrence Taylor that all the coaches were following him to see who he was looking at. So he said that he would watch me from afar at the Senior Bowl because he didn't want anybody else to discover Carl Banks, obviously. So I didn't have any contact with teams. I think Kansas City brought me in for physical. That was the only team. I didn't have any contact with anyone else. And my first contact with the Giants was the day the phone rang, and it was Bill Parcells who said, "We drafted you. I didn't draft you to sit you on the bench. I'll see you next week at minicamp."
Wow, wild stuff. So I think I'm accurate here. You weren't at the draft, right? Because now you see everybody in the first round that's there, and they're hugging their commissioner, and you get the big walk.
Yeah, I don't even know if they had it, but if they did have it, then I wasn't there. It might have been at the Felt Forum. It may have been,
I know they used to do it at like the Sheraton Hotel in New York City.
maybe. So I definitely wasn't invited. But the thing also, Dave, is like I didn't lack confidence, and I didn't lack for knowing how good I was. I was, all Big Ten 3 years in a row, first team.
Hmm.
And at that time I was the first non-kicker to be all Big Ten 3 years in a row. I did get on a All-American football team. I ended up on the Bob Hope special, but like I was not a household name outside of the Big Ten. And in the Big Ten, the only two teams that existed at that time were Ohio State, Michigan, and a little bit of Iowa. So I was just a guy amongst people.
So nowadays we hear these stories about the combine, and I mean it's a televised event. Everyone goes to Indianapolis and they poke you and they prod you and they how fast can you run and how high can you jump and what do you have for dinner last night and do you eat fatty foods and everything. Did that exist back then? I mean, was there a combine where everybody went and got together?
The combine, as you know it today, in Indianapolis, was the same combine that I went to, but there was a second combine. There was one in New Orleans, and then there was one in Indianapolis. The Bledsoe Combine was in New Orleans. Both of them were the same, but they got two looks at players. Right now, I don't think the college players could even, they would be up in arms if they had to go do it twice. But then it was two combines, and I was all about like, let me just expose myself here.
How about the Wonderlic test? We hear about this 500 question test of how intense it is, and you can be marked off of, they ask you about your parents and your grandparents. And is it to that extent that it was back in '84? Is it different now?
It was probably more difficult back then. There was a Wonderlic test. There were a lot of tests, actually written tests, because remember there were competing combines that were both sanctioned by the league. So they were you're prepared for one test in one combine and another test at another combine. But I think they were still asking a lot of intrusive questions. I know they were back in the 80s. There was just like not a lot of political correctness, if you will.
Is there one question that you remember? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe they asked me about that.
It was a blur. It was a blur. I just went in and just answered questions, interviews. They were what they were. I don't know if they had I don't think they had players, at least for me anyway, that I was never in a sit down with a particular team and coaches. So I didn't have any contact with the Giants during combine. I don't think I had. The only team I had contact with on a interpersonal level was the Dallas Cowboys, because they did their own testing within the combine testing.
Let me just say, on behalf of Giants fans all over the place, thank God you weren't taken by the Cowboys, because this affinity and love that I think every Giants fan and NFC East fan has with you would be completely wiped out and non-existent if you were taken by the Cowboys.
And I probably wouldn't be the same guy either. I'd probably been this arrogant, overconfident guy had I played for the Cowboys, because let's face it, that's what they are. I mean,
that's what they've been.
One of my favorite players was Hollywood Henderson, right? Growing up, he was flashy. He was fast. He did everything, but they're all just kind of, that's just the Cowboy way, I guess.
So you're drafted third by the Giants. As you mentioned, you're the first actual selection in the '84 draft. The Giants call you. There's no, because now you hear about, it's private jets and it's limousines and it's to the stadium. Like, you make your way to New York. How does that work out? It's not like it is today, was it?
No, I got a plane ticket. Whitey Hurrah, his name was, picked me up from the airport, and I'm sitting in the back of basically a town car. And yeah, so I'm driving down the turnpike, and the Twin Towers were there, and I'm looking at the skyline, and I look and I see these two apartment buildings in Secaucus. They were Harmon Cove Towers, right? And I asked them, I'm like, wow, because I'm from Flint, Michigan. Like, so the tallest building I've ever seen was like 5 stories high. And I'm looking and I'm like, wow, those are Twin Towers. And he just busts out laughing, because he was a cranky guy. And he's like, no, look behind you. Those are the Twin Towers way back there. And I ended up living in Harmon Cove Towers. But that was my first New York story of like seeing big buildings, and like, I'm like, wow, is this like the Twin Towers? He's like, no, they're much taller than this.
That's funny. Apartment buildings in Secaucus you thought were the Twin Towers. Had you ever been to New York before, or was that your first ever experience with the city?
That was my first experience in the city.
So what was the biggest city you had been to prior to that?
Oh, I spent most of my childhood in Chicago. So
Okay.
I've been in big cities before. Detroit is a big city, but like I spent my entire childhood summers. I was born in Chicago. We moved to Michigan, but all of my relatives were in Chicago. So I spent most of my childhood there. So I knew the big city.
Okay. Were you in touch with anybody from the '84 draft? Like, was there a process where you guys were kind of side by side and went through the combine and kept in touch and followed each other's NFL careers? Do you have that relationship or relationships?
Not really. I think was Ty Bowles. Ty Bowles was in my draft. We made, I think we became friends. But it wasn't a lot. No, I mean, you see guys now and you remember them, but like, I don't think there was like this one guy that I was pen pals with or whatever. I remember my recruiting trips out of high school more than I remember, guys I was drafted with. And, again, most of the guys I was drafted with didn't even think I belonged in the draft anyway, because they were all the bigger names. And so it was kind of a different fraternity of players, like, guys like Greg Bell from Notre Dame, and Tony Hunter and Ricky Hunley. Jackie Shipp was a really good dude, though, from University of Texas. I got a chance to meet Mossy Cade. Oh, Steve Diassi. Steve Diassi and I, were teammates, but we kind of stayed in touch a little bit. But no, I just not really. I didn't keep in touch. I mean, I followed those guys, and sure they watched my career as well.
So you see, I mean, you were third overall selection. You said guys kind of questioned that, and they didn't think you were going to be a big time NFL player. I mean, for the third overall pick,
it's like when, again, it's just like the hype machine then was the Streets and Smith Bible, basically.
which is probably dated, right? I mean, after a little bit of time, that thing goes, yeah.
Yeah, but like they go preseason, midseason, postseason, right? But like they're looking at the Nebraskas, like I said, the Big Eight at that time was powerhouse football, right? The Big 12 at that time, SEC, you didn't know a lot about, right? It was like wherever Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Texas were, because they were must-see TV. And you just had like the Selman brothers at Oklahoma, right? And so everybody kept their eye on what was coming out of Oklahoma. Texas was always a big school. And if it wasn't Ohio State or Michigan, you just really didn't get on the radar of some of these big publications. And if you were in the top 25 of any position, I guess you were supposed to be honored, but most of the top 10 guys were from powerhouse schools. So, me showing up at a combine, and keep in mind, I really wasn't invited. I was a late addition. And those guys were all kind of congregating together. They all knew each other, and I wasn't part of that group, but it was all good. We were all, everybody was friendly.
Sure. It's amazing to me, though, just to kind of see where we are. So you're the third overall pick from Michigan State, which you kind of downplay, but still, I mean, it's a power conference school. And now you fast forward to where we are in 2021. The third overall selection went to North Dakota State and played one game in this most recent season. So you talk about how times have changed. I don't think it'd be more polar opposite.
Well, yeah, and how about this? You play one game, and you have a panel of people that sit on TV that justify how good you are, right? Where, and I'm on a bad team in a power conference, and at that time you couldn't get enough people to speak highly of how good I was, right? So it is interesting, but I'm happy with how these kids, you get to debate them, but at the end of the day they have to put on a uniform and they have to play. So that is the true trier of facts, is their performance, right? So we can hype them all we want.
One of the great players, I mean, one of the great quarterbacks I've ever seen play, and I think you would agree, is Aaron Rodgers. Sounds like he's very unhappy in Green Bay, left to go host Jeopardy for a little bit. Now there's this kind of diametrically opposed view of, is he going to be there, is he not? I guess, whose side are you on here? Are you on the Rodgers side, where he should be allowed to push his narrative and they should help him get over the hump? Or are they doing the right thing in the fact that it's time to think about the future and drafting another quarterback?
So let's unpack that, right? Help him get over the hump. Are they doing the right thing and looking out for their future? Whose side am I on? So I'm always pro player, right? But I'm over it when it comes to him, because it's all passive aggressive. He hasn't spoken on it, but he has all these mouthpieces that either support or not, and he just sits back and he can take inventory of, who's on his side and who's not on his side. So he's a great player. He's one hell of a football player. But I'm kind of over the whole passive aggressive act. Either say you want to be there or say you don't. The team, whether or not they should have told him that they were going to draft a quarterback, they don't owe him an apology for looking out for their future. He's their present, right? And they're not going to do anything. If he's playing well, it's not like they're going to pull the plug on him and say, Jordan Love, it's your time. It's up to Aaron Rodgers, just like he did last year with the MVP season, to keep the guy on the bench. That's just how it goes. He's one of the premier players in the NFL. So, why be insecure about that? I heard Mike Holgram talk about how there maybe should have been a conversation, but then in the same breath, he says, well, we didn't tell Joe Montana that we were bringing in Steve Young. It worked itself out, right? Joe only went on to win 2 Super Bowls while Steve Young was backing him up those 4 years. So you can control your own destiny, no matter what they do. But you can't sit and I listen to a lot of our colleagues talk about how, he was disrespected. Every year there's a different excuse for Aaron Rodgers, right? Well, there was this whole debate just last week about what team could Aaron Rodgers go to? What team has the tools that if Aaron Rodgers went to them, they'd be a instant Super Bowl contender? And I'm like, well, dummies, the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers. How about this? How about, hey, let's have this discussion, Dave. And there was a time where we could do this if his name wasn't Aaron Rodgers, right? If he was an MVP that could not will his team to a Super Bowl appearance or a championship, we would have a conversation about how good he is. Remember the days when it was Peyton Manning? Remember those days?
Yeah, when he couldn't get over the hump, sure.
We were questioning the greatness of Peyton Manning because he couldn't get his team over the hump. Well, that was early his career. By the twilight of his career, he was getting into. He may not have been winning Super Bowls every time he got them there, but he was getting them to Super Bowls. Well, so now is Aaron Rodgers the third rail that we can't touch that subject with him? Because if you're not going to be more equipped to go to a Super Bowl than you are the last 2 seasons in Green Bay. You lead the league in scoring. You got the number 2 receiver in the league, the number 4 rusher in the league. And how about this? In the last championship game, your defense gave you 3 turnovers. You gave them 3 points in exchange. Okay, let's talk about that, right? While we're making excuses for everything that Aaron is, and there's a lot of equivalencies, but let's talk about the facts of football, right? How about getting your team over the hump? Because everybody wants to kill the coach for not going for it on 4th and 8, right? What about 3rd and 8 when you could have scrambled for the touchdown? We don't hear a lot about that. Oh, and when we hear about it, this is what we hear. Oh, he may not have been able to get there. Well, I guarantee you this. The decision to go for it on 4th down would have been a hell of a lot easier if he'd gotten 3, 4, or 5 of those yards. Because now it's 4th and 3, 4th and 2, or 4th and 1. So I'm just kind of over the whole, they owe Aaron X, Y, and Z. They don't owe him anything. Would it have been nice to sit down with him? And then I hear today, oh, well, maybe they should just give him more money and get rid of Jordan Love. No, they moved up for Jordan Love. If Jordan Love has to sit for the next 2 or 3 years, so be it. But if this is a guy you believed in, and as we can see, quarterbacks ain't growing on trees. So if you find somebody you like, you get him, you groom him, and you play him when the time is right. You can't say, well, we're going to sit here with Aaron Rodgers in 2 years when he's gone, or 3 years when he's gone, we're just going to go back to, a place of mediocrity. No, that's not how it should work when you have an opportunity. It's just like what the Colts did when they got Luck and transitioning from Manning. They stepped in it. They got a good quarterback, and they did not have a significant drop off. So I'm just kind of over it, man. Like, either speak up, say you're going to be there, say you don't. You're not owed an apology for a team looking out for its future. See, because you can say it's not about you, it's about us, Aaron. This is about us after you. You're our present. You just continue to do what you do. I don't even care if you even speak to this kid, but he's going to be here. I'm not apologizing. We believe in you. We pay you. Hey, as a matter of fact, we gave you enough tools to win the Super Bowl for the last 2 years. You didn't get us over the hump. How about you focus on that? Because if your name wasn't Aaron Rodgers, then we would be questioning your greatness. But we got so many people making excuses for, what the Packers aren't doing. Well, let's talk about what they are doing. If communication was the biggest detractor, then you'd have half the NFL, and half the NFL is pissed off because teams don't handle these situations right, and they're not obligated to. And it's not a new time in NFL where, NFL players have more say. Yeah, they do. When they have incompetent front offices, they can have a lot of say. But when you have a front office that's put together a personnel group that allows you to get to a championship game, and you have within your power to make a difference in that game, and you chose to throw an incomplete pass and then let everybody else blame the coach, and not you saying, well, maybe I should have did a little something different on third down, I don't want to hear from you.
Wow, strong words. I really respect what you have to say about Aaron Rodgers. All right, Carl, last one, because people tune in, and Carl Banks don't know what he's doing nowadays or what's he up to. So fill us in. You're working for the Giants. Tell us about that, and then of course what you're doing with your clothing stuff too.
Yeah, so I've been the color analyst, the sidekick for Bob Papa, the color analyst for Giants Radio, and then my main business is my sports apparel company. I have the starter brand, so I have the starter jackets and apparel, the Michael Strahan collection. I partnered with Michael MSX for Michael Strahan. G3 Sports by Carl Banks. I do Alyssa Milano's collection. We do a Tommy Hilfiger NFL collection. So I am, in terms of brands of importance to sports, I'm probably the third or fourth important brand in sports behind, the shoe companies. Licensed in all major sports and colleges. So Major League Baseball, NHL, NFL, NBA, NASCAR. I think I got like 150 colleges under license. Wow. So you see a lot of brands in the stands, and chances are 1 in 4 of those brands are mine.
Who would have thought a kid from Flint, Michigan would amount to such great things, huh? Carl, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. I will talk to you soon. You are the best, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. It is now time for story time with Dave Rothenberg. Oh, this is a doozy, and my wife is going to greatly appreciate that I'm sharing this story with all of you, but this is what we do to try and get great stories, is sometimes people are not thrilled with the stories that are told. So let's reminisce back to 2003. The opening Monday Night Football game of the season was my New York Football Giants against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, little did I realize that when we made a plan to move in together, I lived on 27th Street in New York City, my wife on the west side, 57th. We decided we'd move in together, living in sin, but that's okay because we eventually got married, have 2 kids. 17 years later, we're married, right? So we decided on Monday, the first football Monday of the season, we were going to move in together. So the moving company starts 8:30 in the morning at her apartment. Little did I realize she had more stuff than Imelda Marcos, okay? So it takes them so many hours that by the time they get down to my apartment, it's like 5:30 in the afternoon. My apartment's done 35 minutes, 40 minutes, up to 86th Street and 2nd Avenue on the Upper East Side of New York City. But this is where it gets interesting. So now I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, oh my God, it's 7:30. Monday Night Football kicked off. I don't know if it was 8:30 or 9, but it doesn't even matter. So we get to the point where all of a sudden I'm looking and I say, now mind you, I'm looking at my watch. It's say 8:30. Game starts at 8:35, and there's moving people around, and where do you want the couch, and where do you want this, and where do you want that? And I turn to her. And I say, okay, listen, I'm going to go now. Let me know how this turns out. I'll be back when the Giants game is over. She looks me dead in the eye, and she says, so help me God, if you leave this apartment right now, you will never hear from me again. And at that moment, I had a life decision. Do I punt on this relationship, or do I stay in the apartment? Well, I think you know what I did. I stayed in the apartment. So I locked myself in the bedroom and I listened to the game on radio. By the time it's all said and done, it's 7-7 and they're done. Everything has been delivered. Everything is set up the way we want. And I said, listen, we're starving. The Giants are playing. Let's get to the restaurant, okay? We go to the restaurant. The Giants take a lead. And she says, listen, I'm tired. I'm going to go back. She says, but it's our first night in the new apartment. If you make it back before too late, things could happen, right? So the Giants are leading 32-29. For some reason, with 8 seconds left, the Giants are kicking off. They kick the ball out of bounds. The Cowboys get the football. They run a play. They kick a 57-yard field goal. I think it was Chris Boniol. And it's 32-32 into overtime. Giants lose on a field goal in overtime, 35-32. Now, normally, the immature version of me would start walking the streets of Manhattan. But no, I've matured a little bit at this point, so I'm livid, I'm furious. But I have to realize, and I didn't at the time, for this woman who's been waiting her entire life to move in with her dream man, which for some reason is me, now I'm going back to this apartment, and she wants to have romantic time. I'm in no mindset to have romantic time. So I walk back into the apartment. She says, come over to the bed. I said, listen, I don't want any of it. The Giants just blew the game. I can't perform right now. I'm done. And her reaction is, I can't believe I've involved myself with this lunatic. And there you have it. Another edition of Storytime with Rothenberg. And welcome to Stump Rothenberg, maybe the most popular segment of the Rothenberg Untucked podcast. Let's welcome him in. Question one, Joe Villalone.
Yogi Berra has the most World Series rings in baseball history. He has 10.
Okay.
In second place is Joe DiMaggio. He has 9. 4 people are in third place, tied with 8 World Series rings. Can you name 2 of those 4?
Can I name 2? They have to be Yankees. How about, all right. Yankee. So it's got to be a Yankee of the 50s. DiMaggio, 40s into the 50s. Whitey Ford.
No.
Oh, all right. It's not Ford. It's not Mantle. Is it Mantle? Did he win 8? He came up in 51. No, I don't think it's Mantle. Am I close at all with any of my ideas and or guesses here?
They're all Yankees.
I know they're Yankees, but now I have to think of
Go 40s.
Ford.
30s.
Tony Lazzari.
No.
Oh, I don't think it's Gehrig. Could be. We'll put Gehrig on the back burner for the moment. Maybe it is Gehrig. 8, you said?
8.
I'll say Gehrig.
Correct.
Gehrig is 1, and you need another one.
Yes.
Household names?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
2 have their numbers retired.
Really? Wow, that's a big help. Bill Dickey?
Yes.
Ah, all right.
Well done.
Not really.
Well, kind of.
Well, I found my way there. And next up for Stump Rothenberg is one of our producers, George. George, the floor is yours.
I like to give you Giants questions. Last week we did as well.
Yes.
You had Carl Banks on today. He talked about the 86 team. He talked about Lawrence Taylor. He talked about that great team that we all loved. So I'm going to hit you with this one. And it's interesting and it's very, very close. But there is On the 1986 roster,
Okay.
there is one college that is represented the most. It's only 3 players. There are a couple of players that represent 2. One, there's a whole bunch that were 2. There's some Penn State, there's some Michigan.
Okay.
There is one college that is represented the most, whether by draft pick or who signed you, they're on the final roster. From what college? Name the college and I can give you the 3 players.
Boy. All right. So it's going to be a big school. Do I have to go? It's not Morehead State. That's where Phil Simms went, obviously. Could be Alabama, because that's where Rutledge went, and he was the backup quarterback. Banks is Michigan State, but it's not going to be Michigan State. North Carolina, no. Pacific is Lionel Manuel. There's no way it's Pacific. Bavaro is Notre Dame. Could it be Notre Dame? Joe Morris, Syracuse. Could it be Syracuse? Thinking Notre Dame, North Carolina, Syracuse. These are my initial thoughts. I've mentioned the school, haven't I? Yes, I've mentioned it. Notre Dame. I don't think it's Penn State. North Carolina. Those are my choices. Have I narrowed it properly? I have. Yes. I feel like I'm heading in the right direction here. Okay. I'm gonna get it wrong. I have a feeling it's either Syracuse or North Carolina. It's not. It's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the answer.
Notre Dame is the answer. Mark Bavaro, Eric Dorsey, and a backup kicker, Rob Thomas. I think Raul Alegre was the kicker. I think you hit it on.
Eric Dorsey was a rookie that year, right? Number 77. All right, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a nice question.
And there was other teams were 2. Like Penn State had a couple, Alabama had a couple, but they're the only one that had 3.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I like it. You have another one to throw at me?
I'll give you an easy one. I think this is a softball, but Super Bowl 25 in Desert Storm. There was only 1 touchdown thrown in that game. It's an easy one, I think. Who caught it?
I don't appreciate it's so easy. Everyone knows this. It's so easy. It was Stephen Baker would be the answer. He caught a touchdown in the left corner of the end zone to cut the deficit from 12-3 to 12-10 heading into halftime. The Giants got the ball to start the second half. 10-minute drive, 17-10, and away we go. The
touchdown maker, right?
There you go. From Fresno State, maybe?
That I didn't look up.
All right.
You might be right.
Maybe so. All right. Thank you, George.
You got it.
And now we welcome in to Stump Rothenberg, Richard.
Out of the original NBA teams, 2 of them are still in their original location. What are those 2 teams?
The Knicks. Now, they were the Fort Wayne Pistons. Now they're Detroit, so you would not count that.
That is not one of the teams.
The Celtics.
Boom, baby.
That's right. Next up, Stump Rothenberg, TJ.
How are you, Dave?
I am well.
So figured I'd go topical today. I'm going to go 1990 New York Giants.
1990 New York Football Giants.
Throughout the season, the leader in receptions on that team had 39 receptions.
Really?
Who is that man?
God, I hate this question. 39 receptions? 39? Dave Meggett.
There you go.
Boom. Boom. Do you realize the genius that is me? I mean, TJ with this difficult question out of the park. We end the second ever episode of Rothenberg Untucked on a tremendous high note. Think about what we had today. Great, really wonderful interview with the great Carl Banks. A sensational story time with Rothenberg. And I did pretty darn well in Stump Rothenberg as well. Episode 3, next week.